All right, so what do we got so far as questions, reactions, besides narrator's name? Which is Tim.
Really?
Good job.
Yes, that was a complete guess. Alright. So I have a question. So, remember the pastor?
When I give an answer, you're gonna go, "You're wrong," like you did last time.
I will believe you.
Yes.
I'll believe you.
He hasn't made many of them.
Okay. Alright, so there's like a mention of 12 people in a room, and it's like the details the guy kept listing off to the room, like was was symbolic whenever Tim and Dr. or Mr.
They're laughing at you because they don't realize his name is Tim.
Yeah.
Ignore them.
Okay, so Tim and Mr. Norton, whenever they were in the bar, I think there was also 12 people, and there was 3 rooms that 3 people laid in or hung out in, and there was I don't know. I'm having issue finding exactly where the quote was.
So what are you saying?
So who's the guy that gave like the speech, like the 8-page speech, or while in the chapel?
Chapter 5
Sure.
is Homer Barbie.
Okay, so Homer Barbie is giving the speech, and he's like 12 people in a room, and like he's like there's a big grandmother who watches over everybody, and that reminded me of the super cargo guy. And then there was like other details, and it was like I'm pretty sure there were exactly 12 people if you counted one there.
And this is going to seem completely unrelated to what you're saying. Within the prologue, so like in the opening part, when Tim is still underground, anyone remember his view on what he says history is? On how history is like a
Oh, cyclical, right?
Yeah, well, he says it's 2 things. It's like a spiral.
Yeah.
And the other thing that he throws out there is it's like a boomerang. So, what goes around kind of ends up coming back. So you throw the boomerang, it comes back, and you keep going over and over and over and over and over again. So one of the things, I guess in some ways to kind of caution you, Sam, a little bit, is don't, like you want to see where you do want to try to recognize parallels that are going to take place with characters, with setting, and things like that. So I made the comment, like, I think last week, I was in class or homeroom, but to Ben, like I was rereading part of chapter 2, and I started chuckling because I was like, ooh, I didn't notice that before.
Yeah.
It is the reference that gets made, and then it's one that kind of comes back later on in the book. There's another, like, simple little thing. When Tim and Norton go to True Blood's house, the kids are playing a game in the background. Anyone remember what song they're singing? No.
Oh, London Bridge.
London Bridge is falling down. And it's just a subtle little thing. And again, I was like, I'm going to remember that one because something kind of happens with it a little bit later on. So there are a lot of parallels that end up trying to connect things. And that's kind of part of the reason where I break the story into the 3 parts that we do, that you will see a lot of similarities with parts. It doesn't mean every time, though, that like there's 12 people in one place and 12 people in the other. I think the part with Homer Barbie that you're talking about is when the founder's passing away and all the people that are there on the train as he's beginning to die. And the torch is going to get passed over to Dr. Bledsoe for the college.
Yeah.
But there's definitely going to be little parallels that will reinforce some connections with scenes. So this idea about the spiral of history, how things come around over and over again within the prologue is going to be an idea that we'll keep coming back to. What else? Here's what I think is probably going to happen. I bet we talk about the prologue a fair amount today, and maybe get into chapter 1. And then my guess is tomorrow is probably when we talk about True Blood and some other stuff with it. But what would be any parts throughout 1 through 9 where you feel unsure of necessarily what's going on? Because a lot of questions will come up, and Anna had some, and others. Is this part a dream? Is this part real? Is this part dream? Is this part real?
This is a dream versus real thing. The whole like weird fight with all like the money and.
In the Battle Royale scene.
Yeah, it's in the prologue, right?
No, that's chapter 1.
Is it?
Prologue is him underground.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it is.
So in the prologue, you do have a dream sequence that takes place in the prologue, and then in the prologue, you also have him where the mugging by a ghost, where he beats the crap out of another guy for failing to recognize him. But chapter 1 would be where, you have the fight, you have the carpet, you have the speech. Chapter 2, then, True Blood and all that kind of stuff, then leading on to Golden Day.
So, was he ever actually, like, in the college? Or did he just, like, how long was he there for before they sent him to
3 years. He's a
2
junior.
years?
Yep.
Okay.
And that's where you start, where with Allison's at the school for 3 years, and then he goes off to New York. Now, not saying that Allison had to go through a battle royale scene in order to get to the school the way that Tim does, but that's where there would kind of be some parallels. And you kind of going, the college seems like a cult in some ways. I think that the perception, the expectation that the narrator has or that Allison has going into school, and then the viewpoint that you have when everything's all said and done, it is very different, where that reality doesn't quite match up. And that's one of the weird things that also happens with so many dreams. If you are a dreamer, we would say then therefore you're not really in touch with reality. But it's through a lot of the dream sequences that take place that the narrator is actually able to kind of understand reality. So there's a little bit of irony that happens there as well.
So, was the Golden Day, like, just, an asylum then?
It's a brothel.
Okay.
So, like if we were to have a map, you would have the Golden Day, you would have the college, you would have the asylum, and then you would also have where all the sharecroppers live, like the True Bloods and whatnot, in pretty close proximity to one another. So you have the asylum where you have the World War I vets, and every now and then they get a break from the asylum and they go to the Golden Day on their quote unquote field trip. So this would be like McMurphy's expedition, to go out, but this one's sanctioned. But the problem is Supercargo's the main attendant, and
It's crappy.
yeah, essentially. But they would then go back and forth between Golden Day and the asylum, periodically and whatnot. But True Blood and company, would live very close to the college. The asylum's close to the college. The Golden Day is pretty much right there. It's an odd mix of stuff that's going on, and you could argue, in some ways that by using Ben's term here of the college being somewhat of a cult, and when we say a cult, what do we kind of mean? If you belong to a cult, what has happened to you?
Brainwashed.
But in this case, instead of saying brainwashed, I use a different term.
Whitewashed.
They've been whitewashed by all the white philanthropists. Some of the buildings, the description of the paint color of them, you have the black powerhouse, but everything else has a whitewash kind of on it within the college. So here is where this, whitewash kind of education has taken place. You could argue that who is the smartest man that Tim comes across? Who is the most intellectual person that Tim comes across? He would have the most degrees, maybe. But the vet doctor, the World War I doctor that has the conversation with him and Norton, he is an educated, astute, articulate person who is in the asylum. The people who are being whitewashed with their education, those are the ones that are in the college. So it's kind of an opposite of what you would expect where all the smart people would be. Maybe those who actually understand the truth, they're the ones who are deemed as being crazy. Those who are willing to follow along with the cult, with that kind of whitewashed attitude, those are the ones that we are going to produce as the college, is they're going to be successful.
When you say truth, what do you mean by truth? Like realizing that they're gonna get whitewashed if they go to the college and not.
Well, I thought it was like when Dr. Bloodstone talks. He's like, yes,
Well,
I'm
he
fine.
kisses butt. He's butt kisser. That's where he's
Yeah.
at.
But like the World War I, he's like, no, we're okay.
Will Dr. Bloodstone recognize that the game is rigged?
What does Bledsoe want?
Power.
Okay, so here's a guy who is, and I don't mean this necessarily as fault of his, but this is what his primary concern seems to be. There we go. He wants power. He is manipulative, And I think you could certainly argue that he is ruthless, because if you get in his way, what's he going to do? He's going to get rid of you. So Tim messes up by taking Norton to go see True Blood. We can't have this guy around. What kind of education are you getting around here? Don't you know how to lie? But he's a trustee. He's a white trustee. I should trust him. That's what trustees are for, and that's where Ellison kind of starts to get punny from time to time. Who also gets kicked out?
The vet, doctor.
He's getting transferred from the asylum to D.C. Why would he get transferred? Because this is the guy who would actually be telling people, stuff that could actually get in trouble, that could get in Bledsoe's way. All you are is a walking zombie. You're a robot. You're an automaton. You're like the perfect, the perfect individual that the white philanthropist would want to have, because you can be absolutely controlled by them at all times. So, with the truth, I would say the vet doctor is trying to open up Tim's eyes to see things for the way that they truly are, not the way that he would view Bledsoe as like his ultimate hero. If I graduate from college, I'm going to be a successful person just like him.
What's to be his assistant? That's
Oh,
what he says.
oh yeah. I mean, he would love to be like. Basically, he would want to be the next Bledsoe. What's Bledsoe's nickname? That Tim doesn't call him.
Isn't like crazy. Buddha head, that's why. I thought it was racist.
That says bucket.
Buckethead.
No, Buckethead.
Buddha head.
Didn't somebody
Yeah,
somebody
it's
mention
not
like
Buddha.
Buddha?
Yeah.
The fat white guy is Buddha.
Homer. Yeah, has the look.
Home
How does Tim get his scholarship to go to the college?
fights.
Wins a fight.
He wins no.
Speech.
The speech that
He still gets the crap beat out of him.
Yeah.
Because Statlock's the winner. Everyone else is kind of ducking out so that they don't get stuck fighting Tatlock. So Tim ends up having within that chapter 1, you have Tim in the battle royale. Now, what makes this difficult?
He blindfolded.
Okay. What kind of blindfold?
A white one.
It is a white blindfold. Now, after the whole fight, after this, kind of initiation takes place, then he gives a speech. And one of the main elements of his speech that you recognize is he makes very direct allusions and parallels to
BTW.
cast down your bucket.
Doesn't he say something by accident?
Oh, he says,
So,
speech equality.
Speech equality, yeah.
as opposed to, he messes up where he says social
Social.
equality versus social responsibility. And so this is the one that he messes up on when he says social equality. What did you say? Social responsibility, sir. Are you sure? Yes. But before he does that, he has to swallow his words. He has to swallow his pride. He has to swallow his own
Blood.
blood from literally getting the crap beat out of him, right beforehand. So this is pretty allegorical, where it's kind of like a rite of passage. If you want to do something, if you want to go to school, you can go to school, but we get to have pretty much total control, where we're going to, embarrass you. We're going to make this as uncomfortable as possible, whether it's having the burlesque dancer / stripper there, the electrified carpet, all those kinds of things. We're going to make you do all of this stuff just so that you can kind of end up giving your speech. Within his speech, he's doing this reference to cast down your bucket, where when we think of cast down your bucket in 2019, what's our take on Washington's words? They tend to be pretty passive. What were you going to? Okay. Yeah, it keeps going back to it. But yeah, pretty passive, submissive, conciliatory, where you're not really going to fight, you're going to do whatever it is that we want you to. Bledsoe is a buckethead. Bledsoe is a buckethead in that who is he submissive to? The white philanthropist, those who have the white money, the white control, the white power. He'll he'll submit to that so long as it gives him power within his own domain. His cast down your bucket speech that he gives, he is being submissive, he's allowing himself to be beat up and abused, but that gets him a briefcase, that gets him a scholarship to go to the college, so he ends up being okay. But after he gives the speech and he denies the whole social equality, that's where he has the dream then from the grandfather, where the grandfather's laughing at him, you know, the whole circus thing as he opens up all the envelopes and you get that last note to keep this boy running. So if he's always running, he's always under control kind of somebody else. At least young Tim is going to be at this point. They're still confused as to why his name's Tim. They're not on our wavelength.
Wait, Mr. King. Oh wait, sorry. No.
So one thing I was going to say though, what do we know about present day Tim when the book opens?
Just living
Bitter.
underground. No, he's living
Just a little bit.
Bitter.
I don't know why. So he got like ultimately friends.
What- What's probably the biggest characteristic of his little home?
The light bulb.
Middle
Very bright.
bulb.
Is it if it's dark, he'll disappear entirely.
How do you measure light bulbs? There's like two different numbers that generally go with them.
Watts.
Watts and voltage. You say watts.
Watts.
That's like
What do watts measure?
Brightness. Or the,
Not brightness.
Like
yeah,
the,
It's power.
I just memorized it.
So what's he surrounding himself with?
power.
Not just any power,
Kidding me.
white.
Wow.
because he's surrounding himself with white light bulbs. Where's he getting this power from?
Power plant is called.
He's stealing it. The name of the power plant and the company is the Monopolated Light and Power Company. So this company that has the monopoly on power, he is stealing it and he is kind of taking it for himself. So you have a bitter guy who is underground, who's feeling whole within his hole, but you could argue that what's his main concerns? He wants to get power, and in some ways, you know, he is certainly being manipulative with it, as he is stealing the power, which, you know what was his dream to be? This guy. And in kind of a weird sort of way, at the end, what's he kind of end up being like? That same guy who he swears to go after, you know, at the end of chapter 9 when he realized that he's been expelled. What does Tim learn to do? And True Blood is very good at this.
Keeps going.
Grandfather's advice, or I'm sorry, the vet doctor's advice. Don't believe in it, but make sure that you play the game. What does True Blood do?
He plays the game. He gets more help than he had gotten from
I've done the worst thing a person could do, and other than my wife never talking to me, things are pretty good around here. She still takes the clothes that I buy.
risk and reward, man. So that's what it's all about.
What does Norton give him?
$100.
$100. How much money does Tim have before he leaves college? When he packs all his stuff, he has $50. So he's upset that True Blood gets $100 from Norton. You know, for basically sitting there and telling him a story. True Blood goes into extreme detail about the story, where he's not ashamed about it. He's not abashed of telling what happens, because he's probably done what with this story? Over and over and over. Probably not changed it. He doesn't want to change it.
Yeah.
But he keeps telling it, because what happens when the philanthropists come down? The white people within the community, he gets more money from it. The whites support me. The college wants me out of here, because what does he do for the college? He upholds a stereotype. The whites want him around because he upholds a stereotype, and it's kind of proof that this is why you need us here. It's a necessity in order to have this school, so that people end up not being like Jim Trueblood. But Trueblood will go through the story because he knows every time he tells it, there's going to be money coming his way. Tim's upset that he gets money for just telling the story, but then I think you also realize that he's upset because he gets twice the amount, you know, just telling this one story in this 15 minutes than what Tim has in all his like life savings at this point, and that's something that's certainly going to make him pretty upset about. True Blood, it's funny in a couple ways. Within the family, it is true blood with the incest that's taking place. But what does he not do? You know, and Kate wants him out, but no, I'm not going to leave. He is still true to his family. I'm still going to support my family as best I can, even if that means, you know, that I'm going to have to kind of end up telling the story over and over again. But, you know, with the whole spiraling viewpoint of history, you know, that Sam was kind of bringing up at the beginning that we were talking about, one of the things to look at is this whole True Blood versus Tim situations, scenarios where in some ways, what are some similarities as the book unfolds that we discover that they have that maybe Tim doesn't necessarily, you know, really kind of want to admit. So those will be some things that we'll identify as we move forward.
Was it supposed to be, do you think it was intentional that he named it, also named it the Golden Day, and then Tim and would have like the worst days of their lives there? Or like he gets like, that's the day he gets expelled, and like Norton gets assaulted multiple times.
Yeah, and with the True Blood scene and the Golden Day, I would say, end up being very allegorical in nature. And I think this might be something that we get more into tomorrow. Like, I mean, well, one of the coolest names in all of literature probably has to be Supercargo.
That is a good one. Is that his like?
That's what they call him, you know, Supercargo.
It's like, it was just a hefty dude.
Supercargo.
I mean, are you going to mess with a guy named Supercargo?
Probably not.
But they do, and they end up winning, you know, when it's all said and done.
It's all numbers.
Is that a reference to slavery? Because he would have been considered cargo and like he's really strong, so he would have been like the best cargo.
Here's what I think's going on with it, and that's good. I like that. But with this whole idea of like the Golden Day is you have. Oh, better go to a new page here. People in the asylum. We know they're World War I vets. We know that we have a very educated doctor. I don't know. I mean, you know, Cuckoo's Nest to the guys who are in the asylum. Cuckoo's Nest cruise probably seems to be maybe a little more nuts than these folks.
They're like literally insane.
Yeah.
Right.
These guys are just
Shell shock.
Yeah.
Okay, so whether it be some things dealing with shell shock, and in some ways, especially even with the doctor, this is where they belong because based on prejudice, we don't think that these are successful people, can be successful people. There's no right place to put them, so let's put them into the asylum. All right. So the overall viewpoint, the overall perception would be that these people aren't really worth anything. Let's put them in the asylum. No one's going to miss them. They go to the Golden Day. Supercargo takes them to the Golden Day. It's by Hangman.
Pete.
No.
Super Tim.
Man.
Super Tim.
Look at some of these letters in cargo. Supercar? Hey, everyone wants a supercar.
Super ego.
Anyone know what the super ego is?
Big
So this is getting back to Freud, really big ego. It's not a massive ego.
It's white supremacy, right?
Not necessarily. Whitewashing. The super ego is like the collective ego of society. So perceptions,
Right.
what you would say would be part of like super ego. Fear of the dark, fear of spiders. But certainly, if you live in the South in the 1920s, 1930s, racism would kind of be part of those things. But essentially, just collective thought. And this would be a collective thought that is agreed upon or kind of at least pretty much understood from a societal standpoint. What ends up happening with all of the people within the asylum, when they completely take out supercargo, I mean, they knock them down, then they pour water on them to revive them, then they kick them again. Come on, Tim, kick them, it's fun, kick them. Basically they're beating down that viewpoint or that collective thought that they are worthless, they are useless, they are veterans. It's within the golden day, and you're right, it's a terrible day for Norton, it's a terrible day for Tim, but in some ways this is kind of like the new beginning, almost like a dawn kind of taking place where Tim now has a new viewpoint on things. He doesn't realize that he has a new viewpoint, but Norton the vet doctor is certainly giving him some new ideas. Don't be a zombie. Don't be a machine. Don't be an automaton and all that kind of stuff. You need to actually kind of begin to think for yourself. If you're going to think for yourself, you can't rely on that collective thought process that society would put upon you, because essentially society would be going, you know what, for the most part, you're more of an asylum. The real irony is, who is Norton's favorite writer that he wants him to read?
Ralph Waldo Emerson.
You should read Emerson. Emerson teaches self-reliance, but really what Norton is kind of teaching him or wants him to believe would be, you're really a nobody. Any benefits, any rising that takes place is going to be because of my money, the trustees that are going to be supporting you. That's what's going to make you a better person, not your own individual self-reliant actions, thoughts, and stuff like that. You are my fate. You are inextricably tied into me. Anything that you do that's going to be positive is going to be because of me. You are not your own person, is kind of what that subconscious message would be, and that would be the collective thought, the white man's burden idea that is kind of getting rebelled against within the golden day. So yeah, it is ironic that it's a bad day for them all intents and purposes, but you kind of have a new viewpoint, a new perspective that starts to come across, especially with that doctor's advice that would be going on to Tim. But Tim's certainly not going to recognize all of those things at this point.
Do you think he's just disillusioned? Like he just doesn't know what's going on?
Tim?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, he is exceptionally naive. I mean, he's a young kid. This Tim is much different from the young Tim. What basically we find out is, how do you go from being a young, disillusioned, cast your bucket Tim to I'm going to steal as much power as I can and hope to kill Dr. Bledsoe and be underground and steal energy and be manipulative and become whole within my whole.
What do you keep saying? Whole within my whole.
Well, that's what he says. He's whole
Within his whole.
within his whole, but he's hibernating. Call me Jack the Bear, which means he's going to end up, kind of coming back.
Alright, so whenever they're on that bus and he's like, who's the one that says like, you're your own father?
The doctor, when he's talking to
the vet dog that says that?
yeah.
Okay, so then whenever Tim goes to meet Mr. Emerson, Mr. Emerson's like, oh, I'm Mr. Emerson's son.
Right.
So I mean, I think there's some connection between being your own father and that guy alone.
And who knows what would have happened if he meets real Emerson, because he would have the letter that's coming from Bledsoe and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Young Emerson is the one who at least gives him a break, where he sees the letter. I don't think this is necessarily what you think it's going to be. Young Emerson is at least breaking away from that. Like, regular Emerson and Norton would be similar people.
Yeah.
Young Emerson, you at least kind of have that new perspective that's coming across, where he views him a little bit differently than the way like the old traditional guard.
Yeah.
men.
They use Emerson a lot.
Named after Ralph Waldo Emerson. You gotta.
I mean, you gotta show it.
So I would say it starts to dissipate after this part. You know, it
I'm
goes.
getting
What
annoyed.
was the first one? Was it jazz band?
Yeah, Emerson.
Ah. Have a good day.
You too.
Have a good day.
Take care.